Hello there, this is Michael Gio, and today I bring you the part 2 of how to grow mushrooms at home. Do you remember this slide where we have 3 main steps? So let's concentrate on the first step, which is mycelium. Now, here are these 3 things: a plate with mycelia, a syringe, this one is obviously empty, and a tube with a slanted agar. Now we need mycelia. The mycelia is pretty much, as you probably know, the actual fungi. That's the actual mushroom growing. That cotton-like structure, that's pretty much your mushrooms right there. So you order this. This is the thing. You can buy it. Like I said, you can buy it liquid culture. And with this syringe, it comes in a liquid with mycelia in it. In theory, should be completely sterile. Only that microorganism that you bought. Also, you can get these plates. So it's just agar with nutrients, depending of the actual mushroom. It's the actual media, but in general, in mycology, we use malt extract, and then you can see, like in this one, all the mycelia there completely look whitish. Some mushrooms would look like shiitake, for example, that create some brown spot. And obviously the tubes, which in this case you would have it on a smaller amount of agar compared to the plates, and but the mycelia is still there. So you need this. Now, you can buy this or you can make your own, but this is pretty much what you need. So in other words, you need to start with this. Now, and this is the tricky part, and I mentioned in the other video, sometimes you need sterility. And that's the big problem when you actually want to start with this. Again, not necessarily a big problem, it's just you need certain tools in order to create that sterile environment and follow specific aseptic techniques. So if you don't have some sort of cabinet or anything close that you can isolate, let's say, your environment versus your mycelia, what you're working with in a very sterile environment, then it's going to be a little bit difficult because you would get contamination. Now, I made my own laminar flow booth.
And this is how it looked like. That's pressurized chamber with a pre-filter. Then you can see the HEPA filter, which is this big square white thing in there, and plexiglass around it. In here, all the air get filtered. 99.9% of air that's coming out of here is completely clean. And obviously in this area, I can work with all the organisms that I'm working here completely sterile, or at least 99.9% sterile. This area here that you can see is pretty much a pre-filter. There's a big fan in here, and then that fan would blow air through the filter. So pretty much the air would get filtered and goes through the HEPA filter towards me and get the contamination away.
Another idea that you can do is just to create some sort of box. It could be plastic, it could be acrylic, that at least you contain everything in there in your space. You can use Bunsen burners or any like alcohol burners just to create that sterile environment. Use gloves, clean your gloves, sterile glove, or if you don't have sterile gloves, you can just try to sterilize the gloves, like using ethanol and Lysol, things like that, bleach, and then just create that sterile environment that you can work with.
Another way to obtain that mycelia would be to clone your mushrooms.
Now, for some reason, I don't like to use that word, clone your mushrooms, because you're not really cloning. You're really transferring the mycelia from the fruity body of those mushrooms that you find, and then cut it, try to be sterile, and then put it in a plate. But in general, we call it just clone, because you're taking that mycelia from the fruity body and then transfer it to a plate. Now, in order to do that, you need sterility. Now, think about this. Let's say this is your mushroom. right? This is attached to a tree. It's completely exposed to the environment. So everything on the top, everything on the bottom, where in this case the spores are, everything is completely not contaminated, but there's a lot of contaminants in there because it's exposed to the environment. So in order to do this, you need to get mycelia not from the surface, from the fruity body, inside the fruity body. All right. Now another technique is that you can isolate the spores and then try to dilute those spores, so that way you get one spore to grow in your plate, and eventually you would do certain series of transfer until you purify that. You would use a lot of material to do that, but it can be done. The easiest way to do it, and you don't use that much material, is to have, like I said, a very sterile environment, and that way you can remove that mycelia that is inside the fruity body, sterile because it hasn't been exposed. Then you can extract that, put it in your plate. Take a look at this. This is the way that I purify chicken of the wood.
On the top, we have lion's mane mushroom, and in the bottom, the orange one, we have a chicken of the wood. Here you can see that I am cleaning our plates. So in this case, I sprayed it with ethanol and spore cleanse. Also, I'm using Lysol. And in this case, I'm cleaning up those plates. After everything is clean, right now the HEPA filter is going, so everything in theory should be clean. But you see, I have my hands are exposed right now, so pretty much I'm bringing contaminants too. There are other ways to do this also, to wear some sort of sleeves on my hands, that way I don't bring contaminants, but in this case, this should be enough. So right now I'm sterilizing my knife. So as you can see there, I'm sterilizing it. And then what I'm going to do is just try to cut the surface of the lion's mane. I'm going to try to fast forward this video so that way you can see how can I extract that from the lion's mane. So right now I'm extracting a portion of that lion mane and then transfer it to a plate. Now that piece of mycelia is what we call the clone, and in theory that should be sterile. So I repeat this process again and again. Normally you would do a couple of plates, so that way you have some of them would come with either bacteria or yeast or any contaminant until you actually get a pure culture. Now I'm going to try to do the same thing with this chicken of the wood, extracting that piece in there and transfer it to a plate. Don't forget to sterilize again your knife. Going back to the mushroom. Since this gets very hot, obviously you're killing your mushroom when it touches, but that's why you try to extract a piece, normally like square piece in there, and then transfer it to your plate.
So now that you have your mycelia, then it comes the spawn. Now spawn is pretty much just that, just to create something that you can use to spread something, and normally we'd use grain. Now in this case, I'll show you an example here. This is a spawn of shiitake. I normally use corn for it. You can use rye, rice, wheat. For me, corn has been working pretty good for years. Let me show you an example here. This is a sterile container, and I have spawns. In this case, this is oyster mushroom. And in this case, this is ready. I know it's a small amount, but it's ready to spread, and I'll show you how. Another technique is also from these plates, from this mycelia, grow them as a liquid culture. from here, then you can either transfer to sterile syringes for future transfer, or from here to the grain. So again, there's different kinds of techniques. But what do you need? Well, you need mason jars, just like this one. In this case, this is not even a mason jar. This is just a grape jam jar. And you need to obviously sterilize this, put the grains in it. Actually, you need to put the grain, sterilize it, and then inoculate from the mycelium. Like I said, could be liquid culture from the tube, from your plate. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. So this is your spawn in here, and this is ready to go to the next step. But before we go to the next step, let's show you another important thing. This bag comes in different sizes. You can buy it. I'll leave you the link underneath. And what you do is you pretty much open the bag and pour the grains inside. After that, you need to sterilize. So in order to sterilize that, then you would need certain tools, which we're going to talk about in a second. So again, you can use this in order to put the grain, or you can use the mason jar or any kind of jar, as long as it's glass and it actually can resist heat. Okay, so again, different sizes. I normally use this also for the grain because it's easy to sterilize and it's easy to, like in this case, it's easy to manage. So in this case, I can transfer this grain, this mycelia, to the next step, which would be selecting the substrate.
So it is very simple. Just take the corn, the amount that you want to put in the bag, and then just fill out that corn, put it in the bag, and it would totally look like this. The same thing with the hardwood pellets. It is the same thing, just put it here. After that, you need to get it wet, because that is pretty much how the mushrooms will grow. And at the same time, this would be a very important part on the sterilization process, because we need that water to turn into steam in order to sterilize these substrates.
So after you completed that step, then as you can see here, look at how those pellets now are getting, it's like a sponge because it's absorbing all the water. Then you would close this bag and autoclave it.
In order to autoclave, you need a pressure cooker or this mason jar pressure cooker. You pretty much open the lid. Obviously, you have to follow certain directions. In this case, then you put your either grain or bag full of substrate. In this case, I'll show you how to put it. Imagine that I'm autoclaving that. After it's completely loaded, you just put the lid and it's ready to start the sterilization cycle. And toward the end of this video, I will explain you a little bit about autoclaving and sanitization cycle using this type of pressure cooker. In order to inoculate that mycelia to create the spawn or the substrate, you would need this, a burner, a scalpel, and the mycelia. This is represented, this square represents the bag. It could be corn or any kind of grain or the actual substrate. So you start with the plate and the mycelia. You pretty much have to sterilize the scalpel. After 20 seconds there in the fire, watch out because this can get hot. Wait a little bit until it cools down a little bit. Then you go to the mycelia. Cut a piece of the mycelia, bring that mycelia to the bag, and then let that mycelia get into the substrate until it gets in the bottom. Then you close that bag, and obviously after this is just wait until that mycelia grow. I want to show you the proper way to work with this. As you can see, these are completely sterile gloves. I have a wipe full of Lysol in there and cleaning with Lysol my utensils, everything, the equipment that I'm going to use, that actually is sport cleaned, and also a wipe of Lysol. Also, I'm sterilizing each individual tool. So what I want is full sterility. Obviously, I need to sterilize all these tools again, but I right now putting it on a wipe that has right now pretty much fungicide or bactericidal chemicals. On the right side, you can see a Ziploc bag with a syringe. What I want to do is to inoculate a bag of grain to create a spawn with that syringe. But before that, before I use the whole syringe to inoculate this grain, I want to grow this mushroom on plates. So what I'm going to do here is use a little bit of that mycelia that is on the syringe to grow that on plates. So I can pretty much spread that mycelia that I just bought and have them in more plates. Here I'm ready to inoculate the mycelia on the plate. So I remove the cap. You have to be very careful when you're working with the syringe. And open the cap. And try to put there just a little bit of that mycelia in those plates. This is the important part that I want you to see. This comes from the autoclave. I just remove the cable tie that was holding completely tight those, in this case, this grain bag, which is corn. So remember, this must be sterile. So in this environment, I have full sterility since we have the HEPA filter going on. So I open this and pretty much inoculate the mycelia with the syringe. Then what I need to do is just close the bag, and that will be ready for the mycelia to grow and create what we call the spawn. That was with the syringe. Now I mentioned that we can do this same thing using plates. In here I have a plate of lion's mane mycelium growing in this specific plate. So you can see I put sparkling on top of that just to sterilize because this plate came from the fridge or the incubator. I have a fully sterile bag of corn, in this case the grain. And now check the way to do it. So you sterilize your scalpel. Okay. So you're sterilizing it. It's getting very hot. Now what you do is open that plate, that mycelia plate, 45 degrees. Okay. Cut it. And then remove a piece of that mycelia with the agar and put it in the grain bag. In this case, I decided to put a little bit more just because I want growth fast. You close the bag, make sure that is very, very tight because we don't want any contamination. And now it's just time to wait until the mycelia colonize the grain.
You let the mycelia to grow, and the mycelia would start growing around the grain, and pretty much the mycelia, what's going to do is covering all the grain. That's what you want. Now, why we do this? Imagine in each individual grain, you would have mycelia growing in there. That's what is called spawn, because one grain contains a lot of mycelia. That mycelia can actually get into whatever other substrate and start colonizing. So there's different techniques that you can do. Not techniques, actually. There's different things that you can do. From there, you go to substrate in bags, or here you can go outdoor and create mushroom beds, which is probably going to be part of part number 3. Not only you can use pellets, depending on the mushroom, you need to use a different substrate. For example, Pleurotus, in this case, the oyster mushroom, like hay or straw. So in this case, we put straw or hay in this bag the same way. Normally we want to cut it. We don't want to put the whole, like hay, normally the straw comes like very big. You cut it somehow, you put it in this bag, compact that very well, get it wet, and after that, then you autoclave it. After you have your bag with the substrate, then what you're going to do is to inoculate that substrate with the spawn that you just created. In this case, going back to the grain spawn. And it's the same way. In that environmental chamber somehow with sterility, pretty much you have to get this grain, right, and put it in the bags. So pretty much it goes like that. Just take it, not all. You can use a few ounces of the spawn. Normally what I do is just to take a few ounces, just like if you can actually take it with your hand, it would be like a handful. Obviously you don't want to touch it. So pretty much you want to go from the bag without touching it to the other bag. So pretty much what I do is clean everything in the laminar flow booth, or in this case using that HEPA filtration. Then you open this, pour it, remove it, close it. Now it's closed, now it's ready to start growing them. If it's a straw you're using hay, it's the same thing. You would just inoculate that and then just wait. Then the part that comes after that is pretty much to wait for the mycelia to colonize that substrate, as you can see here. After that mycelia has been colonized, then you're ready to go to the last and final step, which pretty much is do something for the mycelia to produce the mushrooms, what you're going to eat. Now, the way that you do it is, depending on the actual mushroom, you need to know humidity, temperature. So mushroom requires specific light to get more mushrooms out of those blocks.
For a smaller scale, you can use this small greenhouse. It is a 4-shelf greenhouse. You can use a humidifier, in this case an ultrasonic humidifier, so you can provide the humidity needed for all these blocks. In this case, this is the third step. Remember, in this case, we are inoculated already our mycelia into the substrate. Take a look at the different harvests that you can have with this small setup. Lastly, autoclave and sterilization.
How to sterilize the substrates or the grain or everything. So in other words, what is that autoclave? When they mention autoclave, well, an autoclave is pretty much a machine that we use in order to sterilize things. Normally we use water, pressure, and temperature. So you create in that chamber high pressure, and because it's high pressure, the water, it creates steam, but not 100 degrees or Celsius or like 212-ish Fahrenheit. The water would boil or create that steam on a higher temperature. Now, because of that, then we can kill organisms, spores, etc. So that's why we have to have it at specific temperature, specific pressure for a long periods of time. Normally, what I do with my pressure cooker or mason jar pressure cooker, I wait until the temperature and the pressure reach around 15 psi, and after that I wait, depending on the substrate, an hour and a half. Now the whole process, at the time that start creating that pressure, it would take around 2 hours. 2 hours and a few more minutes in order to sterilize that substrate. It's been pretty good for me. Some people I've seen that leave it for 2 hours or even more than that. I try to use less time, and try to find less resources, try to spend less money in order to produce my own mushrooms. So far, there's no business around it, so that's why I'm trying to use less resources and less money that I can spend. All right, not that I'm cheap, I just want to produce mushrooms cheaper. Hope you like this video. Stay tuned for part number 3, where we are going to see how to grow mushrooms outdoors. And in there, you don't necessarily need that much sterility, although you would use a lot of the techniques learned in this video in order to use it on logs or any other tools that we use outdoors to grow mushrooms. Stay tuned.